Well, here this big old beautiful thing is. You know, this project to me is just so overwhelming. It's just such a piece of junk, and it needs so much that it's almost like it's worth starting over. And it's so ugly. It's just, I was talking about the friend of mine, it's just amazing all the crap that's scabbed on this. It's just like the worst fabrication you've ever seen. Like, what is this and what is this? I guess that might be something to stand on, but it's just this thing. I mean, I don't know. Anyway, stuff like that is just everywhere. It's just got crap welded on it. Every spot you look, it's got this. I'm gonna cut this air tank off. This big old ugly air tank. I don't know. So scabbed together. I really don't want to start this project because if I end up with some time and money in it, then I'm going to have to finish it. I'm not one to abandon projects, and it's just not something I'm really excited about. This thing feels really heavy. Oh crap. Feels heavy because it is heavy. Just look at this. It's just crap scabbed. This must have broke. I don't know. It's just like this little blob of steel. They just stuck it on there and welded on it. It's just crap welded everywhere. It's just kind of mind-blowing. I didn't realize there was a plate there. I kind of cut into it. I wish I'd have known that. Fixed to put this pump on here. I wanted to show you sort of how it works. We got a gasket, of course. That's pretty straightforward. But we got a spider. It's known as a spider that goes in the end of the pump there, and this engages on this engine to the compressor. If it doesn't have a compressor, it bolts right to the gear housing. But I'm not going to record it. It's a pain. It takes a while. This bolt right there is a nightmare to get to, especially on this, because you can't hardly get up underneath it. It's easier on a truck engine. Now the bolt's right there. It's just like, it's a pain. I'll bolt it on there. I got the fuel pump put on. The hard bolt that's back here is out there in the trees. I actually didn't chunk it, but I didn't put it in. It is really a pain to get to. There's not even any way to actually see it. If it leaks, you told me I told you so, and I can fix it later. I pulled the fuel filter off. I need to get another, make up a hose for here, and I got to put a starter on it. I pulled the old starter off. It's a 42 MT. I'm going back with a gear reduction 39 MT. I'm not necessarily saying these are better starters. I really don't think that they spin as fast, crank an engine as fast as those do. But they do have a lot of torque, and they do work, and they're about half the weight. We got to use a Cummins nose cone spacer. It goes on the end. These are adjustable. You can unbolt the head here, and this will turn. You can bolt it on any direction, but I think the way it's oriented to work, this have the solenoid sticking pretty much up. So I got to make up some battery cables. I have got some cable here I put a single end on, and the battery box used to be right back there. kind of over the drive shaft, and I don't particularly like that. And I think that I'm going to move it and put it on the fender over there. And I think I'm going to put the battery box about right up there. I'm just going to make a battery box. Probably just have 2 batteries. I think 2 batteries should start this fine. You know, I think I'll just put them right here. Well, I think I'll just put the battery box just right here. It'd be easy to set batteries in here. We can actually use these outer walls and everything for part of it in this angle iron. Alright, I got to make up some battery cables here. I got this cut. This is going to be the positive, and the negative I made about 10 inches longer. I always make up my own battery cables. I got a whole bunch of these ends. This is 2/0 wire. We got to have a 1/2 inch eye on the starter end and 3/8 on the battery end. All right, I got a roll of heat shrink here. I don't have any red big enough for this. If I had some red, I could mark a positive red. Okay, skip forward through most of the rest of today. I had to go make over there a couple more battery cables, a jumper from battery to battery, and then we needed a ground to go from here to the frame and here to the block. I've been working on these fuel lines. I bought these fuel hoses off of Amazon, and they're sort of like race car stuff. They are, I've used some of these before, but they were name brand. I really liked them. It's got this Teflon, plastic Teflon coating in them with a steel braided wire and a cloth outer. I took this fuel filter off and there wasn't any water in it, and so I think that this tank's probably okay. I don't know how much fuel's in it. I'm gonna try to get it to run off this fuel. It did the first time, but the second time it wouldn't. I think there might have been a leak in this suction line or something. Anyway, just reuse that filter. It looked fine. Of course, I've got a new one to go on the engine. I have got some clean, this is actually hydraulic fluid inside here, and I'm going to fill this hose up going down into this pump. The reason being is when this pump sucks this oil up, it'll help seal the gears if there's any slack in the gear train and the gear pump, and it'll help that pump to suck better and hopefully pick up fuel. All this stuff's going to be new and dry, so it's going to be kind of hard. It might be a trick to get this thing to start. You know, the pump's completely dry, the filters, I'm going to put some fuel in the filters, but the filters are dry, the hoses are all new and dry. All right, I went ahead and pre-filled this filter. All right, this starter, like most heavy equipment stuff, the starter is not grounded to the case, or the ground back here doesn't hook back to the case, and so you've got to take a ground and go from the starter to the block, or the battery to the block, or something, or the block won't be grounded. I'll pull one of the lifter box bolts out. By the way, if you're working on one of these engines, the way you tell a small cam from a big cam is by looking at these. Back here's where the lifters are. You pull these out, the lifters are attached to them. And on a small cam, they're short like this. On a big cam, they're about twice this big. And this is a cable I had to go home and make, the one that goes from positive to negative. guess this thing's about ready to start. I just sort of ripped some wires out of the dash so we can touch some stuff together here, see if it'll crank and maybe run. Man, I love those 24-volt starters. There's a screw that I was talking about that goes right here. On some pumps it's on the top, and you see a lot of times people will try to fill up these pumps to get them to prime them, and it's really not what you need to do, because the fuel comes directly into the pump. It doesn't matter, they'll run with that housing being completely dry. What you need to do is leave that screw out or loose, start the engine, and let it run till it pushes fuel out right there, and that'll have the pump fuel. The problem is if you put the screw in that, it will pressurize that housing and it'll pump the air that's in the housing back in the intake, if you remember, through the little screen back through the pump, and it'll cause them to sort of airlock. But you don't really need to fill the pump, you just need to leave the screw loose. I just went back and watched the last clip y'all saw. That has actually been about 2 months ago. As soon as I tried to start it, my phone rang a couple of times, and then I had a bunch of people, there was like 3 or 4 people came by and just kind of ruined the rest of the day. Anyway, I didn't start it that day. I did actually start it the next day. It ran, no issues. I ran it for maybe a whole minute. And we're fixing to fire it up. I want to run it. I want to set the overhead. I'm really concerned about a tick that is back here, and that's a really bad thing, and a small cam Cummins. These have got real small cam followers, and they're real notorious about wiping lobes off the cam and the roller followers coming apart, and that causes excess lash, valve lash. It's also pretty smoky. I hope that the setting the overhead, setting the injector timing will fix that. Anyway, let's fire it up. It hadn't ran in several weeks. Hopefully it starts fine. This is the wire that goes to the shutdown solenoid. I'm gonna crank it up, take you over there, let you listen to the tick, and then we're gonna pull the valve covers off and do whatever. Oh, and I got a pair of vice grips here on the throttle. Go ahead and shut it down. I'm not sure how much coolant's in it. So let's get some tools up here and scatter this thing. The turbo on this was mounted sort of over the engine instead of like a, you know, I bet this engine came out of a cab over. With this way this air filter is mounted, this looks factory. Anyway, might be a pain to get to those center rockers. Let's pull this valve cover off and this. I believe that's just a oil bath air cleaner, and I may very well reuse it, but I want to clean it up, straighten out that plate, and we'll bolt it back on later. And I just sort of wanted it out of the way for now. I've got to put these bolts back in because this is what holds part of the rocker box on, and this rocker box is under a really large force. There's a lot of force pushing up on the rocker arms, and if we don't get this torqued right, if we don't get it tight, I'm not going to torque it. I'm going to find the other bolt. It'll throw our adjustment off. I had to get some different bolts and spacers rigged up because the bolts were too long. They just barely bottomed out. So I'm going to jerk all these rocker covers off here. Okay, let's talk about what we're going to try to accomplish here. So we're looking at the rocker arms. The center is the injector. This engine's got 3 heads. There's 2 cylinders per head. The center ones here are the injectors. The inside sets of valves are the intake, and the outside sets of valves are the exhaust valves. So we've got a rocker arm. There's a push rod that goes down in the block. This is the lifter. Is this housing? If you pull this chunk out, the lifter is made onto here, and the cam sits right below it. Anyway, the camshaft pushes up on the push rod onto the rocker arm and actuates either the valves of the injector. So this is a 4-valve engine. There's a bridge here. Hope you can see what's going on. This bridge causes the rocker arm to push equally on both valves. And what we're wanting to do is set the lash between the slack, if you would, that right there, precisely on the intakes and the exhaust valves, so we make sure they're all right. We want to make sure none of them are way out of whack, because if something has moved a lot, it's probably a pretty good indication that the camshaft is flat or the lifter's exploded or something. If they're just out, 10 thousandths or something, they're probably fine. And then we want to set the injectors, and what we're doing with the injectors basically is when the injector rocker arm pushes down on the injector, we want to bottom the injector out with a very precise amount of force. It needs to be perfectly loaded all the way to the bottomed out in the injector. Now on a Cummins, the way you're supposed to do this, which is absolutely idiotic, is there are timing marks on this pulley right there. And there's a place right down there that you line the timing marks up, and it's got an A, B, or C, and you roll the engine over to A, B, or C, and you figure out which cylinder you're supposed to adjust, and you adjust the valves and the rocker arms. Now, in my experience, there's been many of these engines put together, generally by owner operator that doesn't know any better. They'll have the housing apart there, that it'll have a leak or a bearing go out or something. They'll pull that pulley off and the gear out of there, and they'll just slap it back in there. And so the gear isn't retimed. Of course, the engine runs fine, but the timing marks now don't line up. I would love to have been in the room when whoever decided that they were going to put the timing marks on the accessory drive. I would like to just listen to that conversation. I just think that's asinine. But anyway, I have came up with my own method of setting the overhead and the valves on these things, and I got to get a few more tools, and I'll catch you in a second. This thing's got this stupid pin that you pin the poles with. I'm scared to set it up there because I'm afraid it's going to roll off and just knock me out. Okay, so I got me a crank button rigged up. We can crank the engine over now. So my method of doing this is that on all 4-stroke engines that have even number of cylinders, there's 2 pistons at top dead center at one time. And on a 6-cylinder, it's 1 and 6, and then 2 and 5 are a pair, and 3 and 4 are, I think they're called companion cylinders. And so to set the injector and the valves on one of these cylinders, we will take the companion cylinder and run it just past overlap where the exhaust valve closes and the intake valve begins to open. We'll go just past that point, just about maybe 20 degrees or something. So if we bump this over, we're going to start with number 6. So we'll watch number 1. All right, there's the exhaust valve. Lost my button. Okay, there's the exhaust valve. Alright, I missed it. Right there, the intake valve just opened. That'll be good enough. Okay, so we can check that we've got lash here. Okay, we can check the lash. That seems a little excessive, but it doesn't seem like probably anything's blown up. So we'll set the intake valve at 17 thousandths. I've got a feeler gauge here. And we'll set the exhaust at 23. The reason on all engines that the exhaust has actually got more clearance than the intake is because when the engine is running, the exhaust valve will get significantly hotter than the intake and grow more. And so there is some extra clearance there. Okay, so we will break this gem nut loose. It wasn't very tight. We will turn this till we basically take the slack up and then tighten the gem nut down. Okay, now for the injector. At this point, the injector should be all the way down, and what we're going to do is just take our screwdriver and tighten it until we feel the injector bottom out, in which it has done. You can see it. I can feel it right there. The injector seems like it's pretty close. So what we're going to do here is take a torque wrench and torque this bolt to 72 inch-pounds. There's 50, 60, 70. That was jump loose, but that was just right on the money when it came loose. Make sure your jam nut didn't get tight, and that is going to be the correct setting for that injector. Okay, we're going to roll it over until the intake valve begins to open on number 2. Okay, 17 thousandths on the intake. I'm hoping there was, you know, probably close to 10 thousandths extra slack in this exhaust here. I'm hoping that was the tick. This one didn't have hardly any extra slack. Golly. Okay, so y'all get the idea. I'm gonna go through here and do the other 4. Okay, so I got it all done, and I'm ready to see if it'll run. So I should fire it up. Oh, good Lord! Did y'all see that? I got that heater hose off up there, and it started pumping water out of it right in the valve cover. So obviously now I've got to change the oil in this stupid thing. I actually noticed there's a hose that comes off the bottom of the pan and is wired up with this wire. I guess they did this to make it easier to change the oil in the engine. I'm not going to waste y'all's time watching me change the oil. I'm going to drain the oil out of it and put a new filter on. And see? Anyway, drain the oil out of it, put a new filter on it, and I'll catch you in a minute. Alright, later in the day, quite a bit here has happened. I got a new oil filter on it, got the oil drain, changed a few hoses here. This stuff is all kind of temporary. That red hose there was leaking. There's one that goes over to the compressor, and there's a piece of heater hose that goes up there. There's a feel off the radiator. Those are temporary. I'm going to put Strataflex back in here. The water pump's leaking, but I wanted to change those because I want to fill it up with water, and I want to run it for a while. I'm going to do that this evening. So I went through here and kind of brushed off some of these rock irons that got some rust on it. I kind of brushed them off a little bit, got into the vacuum, tried to clean them up. And what I want to do is I got a bucket of water. I'm going to dump a bucket of water down the valve covers and try to wash if I miss some rust, and also if there's any antifreeze still up there. I want to flush it out the oil pan. I would rather be water in the engine than antifreeze, and so I'm going to dump a bucket of water down it before I put oil in it. like that. All right, I got another bucket of water. I'm going to fill the radiator up. Okay, got the drain plug put back in it. I got the radiator mostly full. I'm gonna put 5 gallons of oil in this. Oh, I dumped a gallon of oil in the front and kind of used it to flush the water stuff out of the pan. I'm gonna put 5 gallons of oil in it, crank it up and let it run. It probably holds more than that, but that's all I'm gonna put in it. That'll be plenty for it to build pressure. And I kind of plan on let it get all stirred up. It might get a little bit milky, and then I'm going to drain the oil and change it again, and I'll fill it back up. But for today in this video, I'm gonna put 5 gallons in it. We're gonna bust it off. We ready? What was that? So it's running pretty good, but for some reason it's got aerated fuel. I'm gonna shut it down and figure out what's going on. It may be this out of diesel, and I'll catch you back here when I get it figured out. I put a new fuel filter on it. It's got plenty of fuel, but I found a problem. I left this hose loose. I'm gonna tighten it up and bust it back off. So I had to step back here where I can talk to you. It's been running about probably close to 15 minutes now. It's warmed up. I don't have a water temp gauge or oil pressure gauge, but I can tell it's got oil pressure because it's got oil up around through the rocker shafts, and it's pulling heat through the radiator, so I know it's circulating. It was slinging oil out of the rocker boxes when I would rib it up, so I set the valve covers on it. I put the bolts in the valve covers I could reach with the impact wrench. You know, there's a couple under the turbo it's hot that I'm not going to do till it cools off. But it runs good. The lifter tick is gone. I didn't really see any valves. In fact, the first valve that we set was probably the one that was out the most, and I think it was within 10. I didn't see anything that was out like 50 thousandths or something to give me an indication that the cam was blowing up. There was an injector that was too tight, and most of the injectors were too loose, and the valve spec on this end of the engine was kind of loose, the one we started with, and on the other end of the engine was a little bit tight, but it was not much. I mean, we were maybe 2 or 3 tight and 10 loose at the most. So I think the engine's good. This is a small cam. It's old technology. You know, they were problematic. That's why they quit making them. When I say small cam and big cam, I may have explained this, but a big cam is just physically, it's not like a hot rod. It's just a physically larger cam. It's a 2.5-inch base circle cam instead of 2-inch. But anyway, the motor runs good. The exhaust is clean. It starts good. You know, that was one of my my pet peeves. A lot of the rigs around here, you know, they're a pain to start. People will be jumping across the solenoid with a screwdriver or something stupid, beating on the starter, or they'll have to put jumper cables on. When I run a rig, if my phone rings, I'm gonna reach up there with a key and I want to turn the motor off. I want the motor shut down before I answer my phone. Somebody's talking to me, a company man pulls up, I want to shut that rig down. And I shut down and restart rigs a lot more than most people, but that's just a pet peeve of mine. It's something I wanted to do. And we stretched that base pressure idle spring, or whatever it's called, I'm not sure, in the pump. And I'd like to show how it causes this thing to start. It's still got some air. I tightened that fitting up, and that has fixed the aerated fuel, but there's still some air in the heads. It makes the throttle kind of delayed. You step on it, it doesn't just instantly come to life. It sort of delays a second, and that may kind of make the way it starts a little bit lazier. But I'm done here. I'm gonna pretty much call this video. The next thing we got to do, I'm gonna pull the transmission off of it. The clutch doesn't work. The clutch won't disengage. We got to fix the clutch and the transmission and get all that stuff working. And then I'm gonna start talking about and probably build the operator stand back here. I got to sort of lay out all the gauges and the valves and everything. We're gonna start doing that. But I want to take you up here. We're gonna play with it some more, and then we'll be done here. Blow-by tube, you can see there's a little bit of blow-by, but it's really not that bad. Alright, I'm done for the day. It's hot. God dang, my pickup says it's 107. You know, this motor may not be the motor that lives on this rig forever, but I feel good enough now to move forward. I don't think that it's going to just immediately blow up. And I was a little bit concerned with the lifter TIG that was a possibility. And so I'm going to pull the transmission off of it. Get the clutch working. That'll probably be a whole video. We need to work on the transmission a little bit, and then I think I've kind of already said this, but gotta get gauges and get the dash rigged up and the brakes, and I'd like to sort of make it move, be sort of one of the first things. I'd like to take it to my house. It's just easier for me to work on. Anyway, I'm done rattling. Appreciate you watching, and we will catch you on the next one.